Hi everyone. I've had some questions through email and through the weekly check about doing some assignments, so I thought I'd put together a video about how to be successful or more successful on written assignments. So here's some key points to go through, and hopefully you get something out of it. Again, if you have more questions, feel free to ask. I can provide more resources, or I can clarify any point that I'm making. So first things first, here are some keys that you need to keep in mind when tackling a project like your NASA Women in Literacy, like your infographic, or even like a science fair project, even a lab write-up. So if you just take a second and read through these points, and I'm going to be expanding on each one of these as we go, so no need to read through them. First one is you have to have a goal in mind when you're doing a project. So first thing you need is you got to look at the requirements. You have to read the assessment. Quite often we get questions that are just simply answered through the assignment. Read the rubrics, read the instructions. Normally we have examples in there. Again, we don't mind answering questions if you don't understand the instructions, but please just read the instructions first if you can. Second thing is you need to come up with a plan. You need to plan it out. You need to make sure you have the time and you have the resources and you know what it is you got to do. So you got to come up with a plan. And now that looks different for everybody, but again, have a plan. The first thing you want to do in your plan though is you want to definitely set a timeline. I think the worst thing you can do is just leave things to the last minute. Now, saying that, that's kind of what I do, but sometimes it works out, but sometimes it doesn't. And especially when you're doing things for marks or you're trying to show your best work, getting things done in an orderly fashion, it reduces the stress and usually leads to a much better product. Now, this is a bit of a strange point. You have to know when to think and you got to know when to act. I'll give an example in a second here, but sometimes you need to sit down and think about the steps to try to save you time, and then there's times when maybe that's the wrong thing to do. Maybe you just need to do stuff. Like when you're picking a topic for an assignment, which we'll get to in a second here. So for an example, picking a science fair project. Is this a time to think or a time to act? Well, it depends on you. So you want to fully read the task, understand what you need to do. Then you want to divide it up into sections. Now I've mentioned that before as to like big ideas, but if you're doing a lab, it'd be like intro, conclusion, procedures, that kind of stuff. You want to use a calendar and set some timelines. And then most importantly, you want to pick the first topic that seems interesting. Quite often you'll sit around and you'll pick a topic, and then a week later or a couple days later you'll be like, but sir, can I change my topic? Well, and I'll ask why, and you'd be like, well, I don't know, it doesn't seem like I want to try this one. And I think a lot of times what you're doing in your head is you're trying to think which one would be the easiest. The reality is they're all going to be the same. You just need to pick one and go with it. And a lot of times also, I think you pick a topic and then you realize you know nothing about it, and that might be frightening. I would argue that's actually the best thing to do a project on, because then there's lots of learning to be done. There's lots of things for you to go and get your hands into. You're not going to be complacent and just think you know everything on it. Which leads us into our next point, which is you need to be organized, but you need to go deep. Okay. So what does that look like? Your first step, you need to survey. So you get a topic. Maybe you know something about it. Maybe you don't know anything about it. Well, there's lots of resources out there that you wouldn't necessarily want to use for your research, but you can definitely use to help you understand the topic. Stuff like a YouTube video or Wikipedia. Wikipedia is an amazing source for just getting an idea about something. It's terrible for research. It shouldn't be one of your sources because somebody else has already researched and told you what they think is important. But it's really good to just frame the topic for you. Right? So these secondary sources, things where people have already kind of provided their opinion, you look at a bunch of them. Maybe you'll find some different opinions, and that's your little window into where the argument is. But these are really good sources to go, and so just kind of survey the topic. Don't try to get into your specific research yet. Just go and survey the topic. The second thing is you want to identify the narrative in your project. Right? Every project, every lab, every paper you write, every science fair project you do, it's trying to sell you a story. You're trying to get the reader to go on your journey. So you want to identify the key steps and the key transitions into it. It's like I mentioned in the infographic video, you want to look at what the key transitions are between this topic and that topic and that topic. You want to look at what the major plot details are. If you're writing a play or looking at Shakespeare, like Hamlet, for example, every scene has a major theme in it. They don't just garble everything together. They divide it in nice, clean sections so you can follow along. Well, those are also the big ideas. We use all these words interchangeably. Sorry for doing that, but you want to identify those big plot points, those big ideas, and get them in there. Well, once you have your big ideas, then you want to look for contrary information. You want to look at multiple sources on that. If they're all agreeing on it, well, then that's pretty straightforward. You got your answer. Where the magic happens is when you're looking at sources and they don't agree. Now, we're talking legitimate sources, not ones where you need a tinfoil hat to go and explore, right? If you find legitimate sources that don't agree on it or have a different conclusion, or the data kind of points you a different direction, that's great. That's what you want, right? And that's actually leading us in the last point, which is you stop when your sources don't have the answers, when your sources are like, well, this is as far as we've gotten. We don't know where else to go with this. You're now on the front line of the research. If you keep trying to find answers and all you do is find answers, well, you haven't gone deep enough. So keep going deep until you don't have an answer. That is where you want to live in science. Science is about pushing that boundary, about coming up with more ideas and having a better understanding, and that's where you want to be. Then you want to take your information and summarize and cite it. So make a research document. The infographic presentation had that in there. You have your source, you cut out the info, you put an embedded citation next to it, then you go on to your next source. Okay? Make sure you keep your embedded citation with it. It's going to make it so that when you do the next step, you're not going to get lost. So really what you want to do at that point is then you want to sort your information from your different sources into those key ideas. So when you have your big ideas, and let's say you have 4 big ideas, well, that one big idea might have information from 3 or 4 sources in it. But by keeping those embedded citations on it, it carries over with it, so when you put it into your final product, you remember where you got it from. Then you want to chop your ideas down. Now, I'm going to run you through an example here. But you want to take the information you've gotten and you want to pick out key ideas, and then you want to short form it. You want to jot note it. So here's an example. The most important thing about doing research on a question is to let the information help inform you about what is happening, not to try and bend the information to a false narrative you're trying to create. Only when you then interpret the data, ask questions of it, and draw an inference of your own, have you contributed to the topic at hand. And then I have my embedded citation, Trombley 2020. I just made that up. It's true, but I made it up. Well, what I would do is I would pick out 2, 3, 4 major kind of ideas in this. So the major ideas that I've identified here is you want information to inform you. You want to then draw an inference. And once you've done that, you can contribute to the topic at hand. Well, guess what? I can just rewrite this as learn from your sources, draw inferences, then contribute to the topic, Trombley 2020. I've now taken a large paragraph and shrunk it down into a manageable sentence. So we have 2 examples of information here. Which one explains best? Well, I would say the first one explains the best. It has more information in it. If you've never seen it before, it explains it better. But which one would you rather read on someone's poster? Which one would you have an easier time maybe expanding and having conversation about? Which one would you want to put on a PowerPoint? Well, it's definitely the second one, because then you might have something to say. Otherwise, people are just reading off the screen and there's nothing left for them. So make sure you're chopping down the information. Now, I did have a question about proper voice, so we'll go ahead and throw a little slide in here. Right. Different tasks require different voices. So the sentence that I'm going to throw at you, it's just one that I like to use, why not? The dog ran down the street with a stick in his mouth. Pretty straightforward sentence, something you might see all the way back into, grade 5, right? Well, in a passive voice, the dog ran down the street with a stick in his mouth. That is past. It's passive. I'm not using my name in it. I'm not using any of these personal pronouns, right? I'm just simply stating what happened. That happens to be past tense, but you could do that in present tense. The dog is running down the street with a stick in his mouth. Okay, so like that, right? First person, well, I'm seeing a dog running down the street, blah, blah, blah. And then past passive, with a stick in the mouth, a dog ran down the street. There you go. That's what you'd want to put on a lab report. Right? Now, biography details. So with the NASA assignment, sometimes it's hard to take kind of these details of people and then put it into a passive voice. So the active voice would be something you'd want to say is, I like how she was passionate about space from a young age. That's something you might want to say about the lovely woman that you're researching. Well, how would I turn that into a passive voice? I just rephrase it. From a young age, her passion for space was admirable. Exact same information. I mean, clearly I know it's your opinion because you're the one who wrote it, but I take all those personal pronouns out of it. Now the last step is you need to review, edit, and crop your work once you're done. This is probably the step where I would say that, I mean, if you did everything successful up to here, you're probably getting in the 3s and 4s, but this is really what separates maybe a 4 from a really high 4, or somebody that maybe you didn't do quite a good research, but you still want to provide a great product that maybe stops you from getting up into that 2. So it'll really define kind of, those of you that are kind of at the low end and those of you that are the really high end. This might be the step that really we're not doing properly. First one is you have to review it. Have you read your submission out loud? Have you actually put words to it in the flesh to somebody else to see if it makes sense? If you can't read it out loud, nobody can read it in their head. Because when we read, guess what? It's in our head. When you put something on paper, you know what you want to say, and so your brain will kind of fill in all those little gaps for you. So it might make sense when you're reading it because you know the context about what is written. But somebody else might not get it. Or even when you read it out loud, it might not kind of translate. So please, please, please just read it out loud or have someone read it for you. Edit. Well, have you checked the expectations? So you've now finished the product, right? Have you gone back and looked at the rubric? Have you gone back and looked at the instructions? Have you gone through and looked at requirements and checked them all off to see that you've achieved everything you want to achieve? Do you have your citations? Are they properly done? Are they embedded? Did you actually go through the spelling and grammar check? Are you using lowercase i's, capital I's? Are you using the letter U instead of YOU? These are all things that you need to check, and we still see these quite often on projects. You need to have a formal writing. The last point is cropping. If you're not familiar with what cropping means, it means to chop down. So when you think of like a crop, like a crop of wheat or a crop of rice, well, it's because we chop all these things down. That's why we call it a crop, because we're cutting it. So here we go. If something is repeated, it should be deleted. Sounds pretty good, right? Okay, so let's do it again. If something is repeated, it should be deleted. All right, what's my next point here? If something is similar and already said, it should be deleted. Okay. Seems kind of repetitive. If something looks nice but has no added value, it should be deleted. Okay, a little bit different, but okay, I kind of get the point here. If something looks nice and is being repeated, it has no added value, it should be deleted. All right, yeah, whatever. You get the point? If something looks nice or is being repeated, it has no added value, it should be deleted. Didn't you already say that like 5 times? Well, yeah, that's kind of the point, right? So you'd want to look at all the stuff you have in there, which one does the best job of explaining, and you just delete everything else. And that's what you're left with. So you got to make sure you go through and start cutting out stuff. Quite often I'll be asked, well, how long should something be? How many words should it be? How many pages? Well, my answer would be it needs to be as long as it needs to be for you to explain it the best you can. A lot of times you take it the wrong way. You'll hand in a lab report that's 25 pages. I mean, okay, maybe that's a bit exaggeration, but you'll hand in a lab report that's 25 pages. Someone else will hand in a lab report that's 5 pages. If I have the same level of information and the same level of thinking in both of those papers, which one do you think is better? Well, it's going to be the shorter one. If you can take your ideas and cut them down into the smallest size possible, it's going to be a much, much, much stronger submission. It's called being verbose. We don't want to be verbose. Have I repeated this enough? Can I repeat it again? Or are you bored? Okay, in that case, we'll just end the video here. I hope you learned something. If you need help, please reach out and let me know. Stay safe and take care.